Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hello, welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast. Today we have a surprise guest. I say that because she's wicked funny and I just adore her. Her name is Elaine Williams, and I'm going to read how she describes herself or what she does on her website. After my 13 years of being in this industry, I've learned an important truth. It's impossible to work on camera, confidence, or public speaking by yourself. Going to look bad, and eventually you have to have someone else come along and fix it. You need to have someone who knows her stuff and her best stuff, her words and performance. You need to have an expert's eyes on you and your work, because you just can't see yourself and your blind spots. So I know that wasn't a perfect bio, Elaine. What would you like to add to that?
Well, first of all, thank you, Karen, for having me. And I am so passionate about helping women in particular find their voice and own their power. And sometimes you're just so close to your own story, your own material. I have a joke. I'm like, is this the forest? Is this a tree? Am I a tree? Is there some grass? Or there's another saying I heard that you can't read the label from inside the bottle. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I think sometimes people put all this judgment on themselves. Like, well, I've been speaking my whole life. I should be able to speak. But it's very different speaking in everyday, going to the dry cleaners, buying groceries versus like speaking when people are watching you. And it's a whole different level. So that's some of the work that I love doing, is helping people find their voice. Because I think as babies, we come to the planet. We're like, what? Right? We're like, self-expressed, we can project, everybody's loud, right? And then we get socialized and we learn to lie. Shh, don't say that. Inside voices, don't take an extra cookie, don't be greedy. We get sort of boxed in. And so one of the things, I know you do your own version of this, is helping people find their voice and, whatever that means. So that's what I wanted to add. I could go on, but I know we have a time limit. So,
yeah. So if I had to sum up what you do for skills, it's helping women or men be more confident for speaking and also to be on video. Is that correct?
Yes. My latest iteration is I help women show up powerfully online and in person speaking, etc. And that can look differently for different people, right? And so I help people craft their stories, and I show them, face the light, camera angle. But if we don't deal with the inside blocks, people are not going to, on their own, they're not going to make videos or speak their stories or whatever is in their heart. And I'm like you, I don't want anyone to die with the song in their heart. I want everybody to be like, man, I went for it. It didn't all work out, but I no regrets. So.
Yeah, I love the work that you're doing, and I cannot wait till the day that I hire you. It's in my future plan. So yay! I'm so excited about it. I'm doing Toastmasters now to get the basics, good. but you're my person that's going to make me just blossom with confidence being on video.
Toastmasters is great.
Yeah. I'm like a lot of women. I really don't care to see myself on camera. And it's unfortunate. I think it's a socialization thing, but I also think it's a trauma thing. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think about this so much. I don't know if you've seen, there's a Dove commercial.
Yes.
Oh my God. I was bulimic. I was put on my first diet in the first grade. I was, already, my parents divorced when I was 4, and it was the 70s. So it felt like nobody else was divorced in my little brain, and I know I was reaching for food as comfort. And I know that they were concerned, the parents, but I remember like being limited and not being allowed to have candy or desserts. So that was an early, like feeling left out, feeling like something's wrong with me, and I started binging and purging in the 5th grade and then found laxatives when I turned 12. I read an article about Karen Carpenter. So I know what it's like to struggle with weight and these, just the insane photoshopped things. And I believe we all have that inner child, like we have our intellectual, oh, I understand this concept, right? But emotionally, we're little kids. I mean, I still am, right? And so and I think there's that automatic compare despair that we go through. And I thought I was supposed to look like a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. And I was never fat, but I was muscular. I was short and muscular. But I was so paranoid about food and eating because my dad and my stepmother, and I think they were trying to help and they just didn't know the damage that they were doing. And so, yes, and I still fight the image. I have to remind myself to get current because I still forget that I'm not 21 or 25 auditioning for Broadway or trying to be an actress, an ingenue. I go, wait, Elaine, you're coaching a speaker. Sorry about that. And so sorry. I'm going to put them outside. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
I think this happens to so many women and we're not even aware of it, partly because of the way we're conditioned. In Dallas in the 80s, to be fat was like the worst thing. And I still, I've come a long way, but I think a lot of women feel pressure to have no wrinkles and to look a certain way. And it's part of the patriarchy and part of the conditioning. And Charlize Theron is one of my favorite actresses. She's so beautiful. And her mother never talked about her looks. She was like, your worth is from who you are. And it just wasn't. And I'm like, I wish we could all grow up with that kind of parenting.
Yes. Yeah, I was put in Weight Watchers as a young kid. And I wonder what I would look like if I had never started dieting, because all the diets I ever did, I could lose weight very easily, but I always gained it all back and then more.
Yeah.
So had I not been on that original diet, I wonder what I would look like today.
The yo-yo. Yep.
Yeah. So Elaine, is your struggles with eating disorders, is that the bulk of your trauma, or were there other things that happened that you want to share?
Oh, Karen.
I know, I'm funny.
I went to see this EMDR lady years ago because my mother had hit on my boyfriend after he'd broken up with me, and I was devastated, but I was committed to still having a relationship with her, but I didn't want to be like raging. So I did EMDR several sessions. And the first session, when I was just sort of catching her up, she said, you've had a lot of trauma. So, there was my dad had a cousin, Uncle Chip, who has since deceased. He took his own life, but I think that he was sexually abused as a kid by a family member. And I was manipulated into having sex with Uncle Chip, who is married and adult. And, it's one thing to fool around with high school boys, in my opinion, but Uncle Chip, it was a whole other thing. And I felt so mixed up because I felt embarrassed and ashamed and I didn't really like it, but I loved the attention. I was so desperate for attention. And I know, I don't think most parents go, I'm going to really try to screw up my kid today, or, but they were doing the best they could, but they were dealing with addictions, codependency. There were a lot of things happening in the family and nobody was really paying attention in the way I needed it. And so I was always seeking love in all the wrong places. So that incident happened with my Uncle Chip. And then other instances happened with my brother and my brother's friends. And I did not know I could say no. Like there was a part of me that loved the attention. And, looking back, I'm sure that I was depressed and anxious. So that was unmedicated. And then even though I had a little bit of therapy, I wasn't in it all the time, but I didn't have a sense of self, and I didn't know that I could say no. And I think part of it was the alcoholic environment, and there were not really boundaries. We didn't talk about boundaries. That was just, it was the 70s and 80s. And luckily I had a high school, I had several mentors, and I had a horse trainer, and she said, you don't have to do that. You can come stay with me on the weekends when your parents are out of town. And I was like, I can. Like, I just had such low self-esteem and no identity. And to this day, I still don't, I'm not sure if it's because I already had an addictive personality. I was already in active addiction with food, or I don't know if it's because I was so needy and all three of the parents were not available, or maybe it was a combo. But like, I also remember riding a motorcycle with my dad and being so excited to be on the back with him, even though my leg was getting burned by the muffler. I didn't have the gumption, confidence, whatever, to say, ow, my leg is burning. I just was holding on. I was so excited to have my dad and be a part of it, but at such a cost. And so, I don't know in the therapy world what all that means, but so that's, that's how I grew up. And then, the sexual stuff was hard, but I think for me, begging my father to get off the phone because my stepmother was following me around and hitting me. And I knew that if I turned around, there was going to be an escalation, and she would get drunk and she would follow me around and push me. And I would say, Daddy, can you get off the phone? And he was not able to get off the phone. Like, he wasn't capable. And so that was, I think, that feeling of betrayal, because unfortunately that situation happened many times. And I don't think my siblings were experiencing this kind of behavior like I did. I think that I reminded my stepmother of my mother, and I'm sure my stepmother knew she was an addict or an alcoholic on some level, and probably recognized the addictive personality in me. So, so there was, I was the lightning rod. And I mean, I know it was hard for everybody in the family, but I was the middle child. I went from eldest to middle. So there was just a lot happening, a lot.
Yeah. Well, I don't care what you were addicted to. She had no right to treat you that way. She just didn't. You deserve much, much more. So that's a lot. Did we get most of the traumas? Is there anything else that you want to share, or not? It's really okay.
Well, I guess
going on.
You know what? I feel like I want to share this because I've done so much work, and I'm hoping, obviously, that this is going to help somebody. And so I think this is also very typical, right? So like, bad stuff's happening at home. So I poured my life into school. I was president of everything, and show choir, and just super overachiever in AP classes, because that was my identity, because home was so crazy. And we were having pictures, and we had these god awful red polyester choir dresses, and I had forgotten mine. And if you didn't have your dress, you couldn't be in the picture. And so my whole life was about being in the yearbook, And so I remember like running home, and Maria had pulled apart my closet and ripped it apart for something else. And I could not find my dress. And so I came back to the school, and I was very upset. And the night before, she had been in one of those things where she was pushing me, and I couldn't get away from her, and I couldn't get my dad to help me. So I was like this, right? And I see her walking down the hall, and she's got my sister's choir dress. And I was like, well, where's mine? And she's like, you lower your tone, young lady. And I know I said something, and before I knew it, we were in a fist fight. She started it, and I was just defending myself. But I know we were both screaming. It was like an explosion. And obviously, I mean, it was so traumatic to have this woman come be on my grounds, and my trigonometry teacher / coach had to pull her off of me. And she was bleeding. I was bleeding. There was a jacket, a lamb jacket that was in shreds. And so I'm like sobbing, but I go to class because that's what I did. And I got called into the principal's office, and there's my dad and my stepmother, and she's lying and saying that I attacked her. And Mr. Pierce, who I just adored, was like, Elaine, this just doesn't seem like you. And it was her word against mine. So I'm like even more upset. And my choir director, Ms. Bircher, who was like my mom, after school, she said, we're going to go see Mr. Pierce. And she took me, and she took me to the office, and she said, I know what's happening in this house. Elaine is a gentle and kind person. She would never start a fight. This woman is crazy and drinking and drugging, and I will never forget that.
Wow.
Just to have somebody advocate for me, because nobody was advocating. My mother had taken off to go live in Europe. And so anyway, I want to share that because that was very traumatic, so right? It was my only safe space. And that was, and there's still hope. Like if you're listening and you've had something similar, I was gang raped, Padre Island spring break. I remember like I couldn't find my friends, and I was in this closet, and I couldn't seem to move my body. And I had this memory of different boys coming in and taking turns. And I've spoken about this publicly just because it happens so often. Anyway, the good news is there is hope and there is help. If you're listening and anything like this has happened to you, I have done a ton of therapy work and EMDR and EFT and Landmark Forum. And, it's just a lifetime of healing. And I'm so grateful that I have been able to have compassion for myself and everybody else. And knowing that, this is just very typical alcoholic family is helpful. It doesn't make it right, but just knowing you're not alone, and like, so when girls are having sex way too early, they often develop eating disorders. Oh, okay. When there's no boundaries and there is verbal and emotional abuse at home, you're likely to develop eating disorders that would then possibly morph. Oh, because, when you're in it, you think you're the only one, and you carry around the shame. And, for the longest time, I did feel like I was the black sheep of my family. And, Karen, I am so grateful that I've been able to make peace with my father and my mother. And I led my stepmother's memorial service. Now, I had to do a lot of work. I wrote a long letter and gave it to a tree in Austin, like raging, screaming, crying. And then she had OD'd. She OD'd on morphine. She basically just kept pushing her pump. And that's how she wanted to go, because she was just one of the sickest people I've ever, known. And to be able to lead her memorial in White Rock Lake, where we had, had so much love and fun. And then I read Marianne Williamson stuff. Everybody came in the middle and said what happened, how great she was before she got so sick. And then it was a 15-minute service in July in Texas, but we had a canopy of clouds. Like God was there because it was not brutally hot in July in Texas. That was, and then we released butterflies to symbolize that she was finally free and that we were free. And the next day, my dad called me and he said, there's butterflies by my office. And I said, maybe it's spirit thanking us. So I am so grateful that I've been able to do the work. And, my mother is a classic narcissist, and she did the best job she could. She had her own pain, her own trauma. And so I can like have a relationship with her today. I'm never going to be super tight because it's just not safe. Yeah. But I'm so grateful that I have been able to do this work before my father and my mother, they're still on this planet.
Beautiful. You mentioned the word shame a couple of times. Where are you in your healing journey with shame? Have you been able to release that yet?
Wow. I knew you were going to ask some juicy ones, Karen. So I moved to New York City in 2000. I did the Landmark Forum, had a huge spiritual awakening. That was the beginning of my healing in November of 97. Then I did every Landmark course and and then I moved to New York and get sober. And I'm like, I'm good. I'm busy. I'm auditioning, and then I did it one day with Debbie Ford. And within the first 5 minutes, I'm sobbing, I'm weeping. And I was like, wow, I didn't realize there was so much, So luckily I did a lot more work. And I could not figure out, Karen, how sometimes I would be like, auditioning on the road, doing my thing, following my dream. And then something would happen and I would get taken out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a tsunami just.
Yeah.
And I would go into survival mode of just getting through my restaurant shifts, getting through, I didn't understand what was happening. And then luckily I would like go do another course or do some kind of healing. And then I would kind of get back like, okay. And when I was listening to Brene Brown and she talked about buried shame, I was like, that it was like a whole other layer of, because I didn't know that's what was happening to me. And so I am sure there's more. I'm sure there's more. And, I think I get to keep doing my work, not just for me, but for my family, my friends, and my clients. And I know that every time I do something that's healing and a new uncovering, I can then help more people too. And so, I'm finally have learned to trust the process. I saw my first love in December. He lives in Dallas and we had kept in touch through the years, but maybe because I'm here for longer periods, helping with my family, seeing him, I could not stop sobbing. And he's married and, and I didn't want to like call him at home, but so I was like sobbing, like ugly crying, grieving. I realized that I had met him right after my spring break freshman year when I had been gangbanged and then found out our family's dog had died. And then my dad and my stepmother said, we're not paying for college anymore. And so I had never processed any of that. I had just shoved it down in a new lower level of alcoholism and addiction. And I started working at Chili's where I met Mac. And so anyway, so I'm like ugly crying all in December, regretting all the choices I made. If I was ever going to have a kid, it would have been with him. Like, just like, and luckily he was like happy to talk with me and talk through things. And I knew to trust the process. And because I was like, I'm supposed to be happy. It's December. I'm not, no, this has ruined my Christmas. And like, I had 3 days where my sister was like, are you going to be okay? And I knew to keep going. I knew like, I don't understand this. This is delayed grief. This is stuff that never got processed. So I meditated, I prayed, I worked out, I did yoga, I went to my meetings, I talked to my network, and I trusted that there was going to be gold on the other side. Because I've had many, many emotional bottoms in my 22 years of recovery. And I'm grateful. And I was sponsoring this new young woman who was just amazing. And we would go do step work at the Arboretum and I would end up crying. And I was like, I'm not crazy, I promise. Anyway, she found a different sponsor, whatever. But, I'm grateful that I know, okay, I'm in this thing that I need to grieve. I need to grieve. I had my childhood kind of yanked away by my stepmother, and she was in my life since I was 3. And I think that I would have been an addict or had alcoholic tendencies with or without her and the trauma. I don't know. But anyway, I'm grateful that I got to grieve all of that. And since I've been able to reconnect with Mac, it's been very healing. Because he was like the good guy. He was like the guy that got away, which I'm glad for him that he did, because I was on my path of destruction. And I think I would have taken him down with me, and so it's been, just great just to reconnect on a friendship level, and he has forgiven me.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Elaine, I really appreciate how authentic and genuine you are, and allowing yourself to be so vulnerable to share your story. What I would like to do, because of time, is to invite you back to share more. I would really love to hear more about your healing journey. I think it's a powerful story. I think you're a powerful woman. And I don't know if you have done this or thinking about doing this, but man, I hope you think about writing your story. Have you thought about that?
Well, it's interesting because I've done it in bits and pieces. I did a tip book, how to, identify the addictive warning signs in your friends and what to do about it. And it was like a tip book. So I shared part of my story, and then I did another book on sexual assault, awareness, prevention, and response. But I just signed up to write a chapter in an anthology about the power of community. And so I'm going to go, way deeper, because I think it's needed now more than ever. I think we're having
Absolutely.
A mental meltdown as a society. And I keep, I'm always like, okay, show me, where do you want me to go? I think, not obviously the mass shootings, which are horrific, but like the assaults on airplanes, and I had another therapist friend say how when people are isolated or out of their routine or extra stressed, psychosis goes up, and that COVID is sort of like, brought it more to the surface. And so however I can help, that was my deal. Like, I'm lucky to be alive. I put myself in some really strange and dangerous situations. So yeah, I've got tons more stories if you want to hear them.
Yeah, I think it can really help the audience, whatever you're comfortable with sharing. And so as we wrap up, my question for you, because I want it to be a teaching example as well. Your voice broke a few times, so this is still pretty emotional, which just shows me you get a big heart. That's all that means. Like, I'm not super worried about your safety or anything like that. I am comfortable with people being emotional. Good thing I'm a therapist, right?
Yeah.
So my question, though, that I think could help other people is, what are you going to do after this podcast to nurture and take care of yourself?
Oh, that's great. Oh, I am going to journal for a moment, and I'm going to call my comedy buddy, who is such a gift, and catch up with her. And sometimes we write on Sundays. And yeah, probably reach out. And I'm also doing some client work today. And, I feel so grateful that I get to do the work that I'm doing, because all of my clients are like super generous, super heart-centered, just want to contribute. They're just amazing. And every once in a while I have to I'm so grateful to have my business and that I'm still getting to perform. And, there's just a lot of things in the work. So yeah, I think I'm just going to connect and breathe, and I'm taking care of some really cool dogs. So I'm going to take them on a walk later.
Good. Okay. Well, unfortunately, we have to end. I don't want to, but you're committing to coming back. Is that right?
I would love to.
Okay. You're going to be part 2. Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.